The only reason I ask that is for the sake and benefit of my own memory. I like retreading a little bit of where we were.
I don't think we even finished with the first chapter.
No, we had just started.
Yeah.
I think with the first 5 verses. This evening we'll start over in Jeremiah, Jeremiah chapter 12. But before we get to reading in that, when we were here last time, we were discussing the sort of the political climate of when this letter was written. These things were prophesied. We spoke about how this was a very successful time for both Israel and Judah, as God had blessed them and prospered them in the land, peace from some of their enemies. If you recall, for much of Israel's history, Syria coming out of the north here, the capital being Damascus, kind of where my finger is right there, they had really been harassing Israel from the north for a very long time. The capital of Israel at the time, let's see if I can find it, was Samaria, right here. And Syria spent a lot of military campaigns pushing down farther into Israel, to the point where Israel had cities and towns up into here, up into Jezreel, which is right here, kind of pushing up into here. But this right here, this entire area between Shechem, Samaria, down here where the capital was, Jezreel, some of the other tribes up here, all the way up into Dan, they shared a border. Syria would often come into this area of territory and take some of these smaller towns. Now I realize that for all of you except for maybe Sierra, you can't even tell that there's little towns here, but there are. There are a lot of little towns dotted all throughout this area right here, the Sea of Galilee, down into this area, because this was all a lot of really good grazing land, right? If you recall, as God had given Israel and Judah this area as a nation, when they came in and they conquered the land, He was giving them a very fertile piece of ground. When you look at pictures of this area, a lot of it is very green. And in fact, before we read there in Jeremiah, one of the things that stands out about the man Amos is that he was, our Bibles call him a herdman. We might think of him as a rancher or a cattle breeder. He was the word that was used there was only used to describe him and the king of Moab. The king of Moab, his tribute, when he was paying tribute to, I believe it was Judea and to Israel, when he was paying tribute, a large portion of that tribute was in lambs, was in cattle, because he was a breeder of cattle, these being a very valuable resource, right? They bred very valuable animals. We think of show cattle today. We think of prize-winning meat cattle, things like that. The word that was used to describe Amos that we have translated as herdman is that same word, denoting that he was a man who bred these really prized, really sought-after animals. We also find over in Amos chapter 7, as he was talking to the priest of, I believe it was Bethel. I'll just turn there real quick. Chapter 7, verse 14. Then answered Amos and said to Amaziah, not King Amaziah, the priest at Bethel, that I was no prophet, neither was I a prophet's son, but I was a herdman and a gatherer of sycamore fruit. Other translations call these figs. The sycamore tree isn't what we think of as the American sycamore. It was a type of fig tree that its fruit, the fruit that it bore, was a little bit smaller than the common fig. It was also a lot sweeter. These only grew in certain areas around the Dead Sea down here, in various oases down here, and then along this river. But very sought after land where these orchards were, because they're very fertile, very well irrigated land. So this man Amos, he was very well off, and I can't remember where exactly I was going with any of that. But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that during this time that Amos prophesied, these nations were prospering, right? They were very, very well off, both Israel and Judea. And the man that God chose to be his messenger during this time was just a display of that. He didn't take one of the poor people from the land, and we will read later how the poor in the land were despised. They were used very unrighteously, very unjustly during this time. There was a great division. Remember, we read about that in our opening introduction to the book, and that pamphlet that we all still hopefully have, about how there's this disparity between the very wealthy and the very poor. The very poor were exploited. God didn't choose one of these very poor, very exploited people to be his messenger, right? We would think of that as being, well, God chooses one of the very poor. He's coming up telling these rich people how terrible the things that they're doing are. They might be dismissed as just being someone who, well, you're not very well off anyways. Why are you bringing these messages of destruction, right? Go back to being poor. But instead, he chose a man who was well off, who had a lot of money, with the idea being, well, this message will probably have a lot more impact coming from someone who's declaring these messages of judgment, not from a position of disparity, but rather from a position of more an equal ground. Sierra, you have a thought?
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting you pointing out that he came not from the poor. Like, it makes sense, but it's just normally when you think of God calling people, he calls the weak, he calls the poor, he calls those things. And so it was interesting to point out that, like, in this case, it was the opposite because of the circumstance.
Right. And we see that in a few different places throughout the scriptures, don't we? Isaiah was also very well off. He was cousin to the kings, right? He was of the royal blood, and God used him to go to Judah and to proclaim to these kings because he had that position where he was kin to the king. He could freely go in and out of the palace and declare the things that God had to say to these people. That's just a little bit about what we went over last time as we spoke about these two kings that Amos was sent to, the time that he was sent to them. One of the things that these are my old notes. Sorry, I've got 4 pages of notes here. I'm trying to... I suppose before I get distracted, going over everything we've already gone over, we should go to Jeremiah 12 and read that. How about we do that? Alright, Jeremiah chapter 12. It should be noted also this was prophesied, this was told about 180 years after the things that we read about in Amos. Amos was before Israel even had been led away into captivity. Jeremiah was written as Judah was being led away into captivity, or a little bit before Judea was led away into captivity. Congruent with Isaiah. Isaiah was still prophet when Israel was led away into Assyria. So this is before Judea was led into captivity, but after probably after, right around the time that Israel was being led away into captivity. And God had this to say through Jeremiah. We'll just read all 17 verses here. Righteous art thou, O Lord, when I plead with thee, yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. Wherefore doth the way of the wicked prosper? Wherefore are all they happy that deal very treacherously? Thou hast planted them, yea, they have taken root, they grow, yea, they bring forth fruit. Thou art near in their mouth, and far from their reins. But thou, O Lord, knowest me. Thou hast seen me, and tried mine heart toward thee. Hold them out like sheep for the slaughter, and prepare them for the day of slaughter. How long shall the land mourn, and the herbs of every field wither? For the wickedness of them that dwell therein, the beasts are consumed, and the birds, because they said, He shall not see our last end. If thou hast run with the footmen, and they have wearied thee, how canst thou contend with the horses? And if in the land of peace, wherein thou treadest, they wearied thee, then how wilt thou do in the swelling of the Jordan? For even thy brethren in the house of thy father, even they have dwelt treacherously with thee. Yea, they have called a multitude after thee. Believe them not, though they speak fair words unto thee. I have forsaken mine house, I have left mine heritage, I have given the dearly beloved of my soul into the hand of her enemies. My heritage is unto me as a lion in the forest. It cries out against me, therefore I have hated it. My heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. The birds round about are against her. Come ye, assemble all the beasts of the field. Come to devour. Many pastors have destroyed my vineyard. They have trodden my portion under foot. They have made my pleasant portion a desolate wilderness. They have made it desolate, and being desolate, it mourns unto me. The whole land is made desolate, because no man layeth it to heart. The spoilers are come upon all high places through the wilderness, for the sword of the Lord shall devour from the one end of the land to the other end of the land. No flesh shall have peace. They have sown wheat, but shall reap thorns. They have put themselves to pain, but shall not profit. They shall be ashamed of your revenues, because of the fierce anger of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord against all mine evil neighbors, that touch the inheritance which I have caused my people Israel to inherit. Behold, I will pluck them out of their land, and pluck out of the house of Judah from among them. And it shall come to pass, after I have plucked them out, I will return and have compassion on them, and will bring them again, every man to his heritage, every man to his land. And it shall come to pass, if they will diligently learn the ways of my people, to swear by my name, the Lord liveth, as they taught my people to swear by Baal, then shall they be built in the midst of my people. But if they will not obey, I will utterly pluck up and destroy that nation, saith the Lord. So while it may not be clear to us in just a continuous reading through this chapter, especially the way I read it, where I really didn't emphasize anything, what we have here in Jeremiah chapter 12 is this back and forth between Jeremiah and the Lord, this question and answer. As Jeremiah is asking the Lord what he's going to do in judgment for his people, for the nations around him, we find that Jeremiah is speaking sort of in the first person, asking for mercy for the Lord's people, as he is witnessing destruction, as he is witnessing the Lord's proclamation of judgment, and the Lord answering Jeremiah in verse 5 rather. So the first 4 verses are Jeremiah pleading his case. Verse 5 picks up with Well, if you've run with the footmen and they've wearied you, how can you contend with the horses? And if in the land of peace where you tread, they have wearied you, then how are you going to deal with the swelling of the Jordan, right? How are you going to deal with times getting hard? Jeremiah is looking to the things that God is proclaiming and seeing hard times for everyone. And we see in this chapter as the Lord is answering Jeremiah, he's telling him that, these people have done things that are worthy of judgment. These people have committed sins against me. I put them into the land. They did not revere me as God. They will be taken out for a time. But then the later half of this chapter is a promise of restoration, not just to Israel, but also a promise of restoration to Gentiles. We see the end of this chapter being a future-looking and eternal prophecy that is looking toward eternity, looking toward the restoration not just of Israel and Judah as a nation, but also looking to the restoration when the Gentile people are allowed to come into the land again. Right there in verse, let's see if I can find it again. Verse 14, as he's declaring that all these evil neighbors that touch the inheritance, that touch this land of Israel and Judah will be cast out. Other people will be allowed to come into these lands, and if they obey the Lord, if they do well in the Lord's sight, they'll be allowed to remain in those areas. They'll be allowed to remain in those lands. But if they do wickedly, then the Lord is going to pluck them out also. We see as we read in Amos, as we read in these prophecies, as God is declaring to these other nations through this prophet Amos what he is going to do. All these nations that he's talking about in these first about chapter and a half of this book are all the nations that are surrounding that promised land, all the nations that are surrounding his people. And so last time we were together, we talked about Syria, we talked about Damascus, as God dealt with that people first. This evening we'll talk a little bit about, we'll just pick up in verse 6, as he's talking about Gaza. Give me a second here. That cold is getting a little better, but it's still pretty firmly entrenched in my head, so sometimes I just gotta take a second to try and unclog those ears. Amos chapter 1, verse 6. Actually, before we do that, now that we've covered all our recap, are there any questions, any comments before we move on? We all feel like we're caught up? Fantastic. All right. Amos chapter 1, verse 6. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away the whole captivity, to deliver them up to Edom. Behold, I will send fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof. And I will cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and from him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon. I will turn my hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines will perish, saith the Lord God. We find that this isn't the only place that God pronounces judgment against the Philistine people. Remembering the history of Israel, they have been dealing with the Philistines, the people that dwell in basically this entire strip, for pretty much their entire history. One of the main reasons why God said that he led them through the wilderness the way that he did is because these Philistine people were already firmly entrenched in this area along the coast when Israel was coming out of Egypt back in Exodus. They were very warlike people, right? Remember, as Israel underneath the judges, they were subject to the Philistines for a time. Under Saul, under David, they continually fought against them. And even as Israel and as Judah prospered in other areas, the Philistine people were still a thorn in their side. They still would come up against them very often, sharing that border. And even today, we find Israel still dealing with the Philistine people, don't we? We find that Gaza just came up in the news here over the last couple of days with Donald Trump saying that America would try and help Israel out, try and alleviate some of the burden that Israel was feeling dealing with the people of Gaza by bringing our military in and being an occupying force there in Gaza. And of course, I think some developments have been made there where it sounds like we aren't actually going to move into that area. Our armies are still going to probably hold a presence, as we have done for a very long time, hold a presence in that area, be a supporting force for the Israeli army. But that entire area from down in here all the way up into, I think, up to Java, and all that area, it's still occupied. It's still not subjected to Israel. Let's turn over to Zephaniah chapter 2. We find a couple other places where God speaks against the Philistines. He speaks against these people. And one of those is in Zephaniah chapter 2. The other one, if you want to turn ahead, actually you don't have to turn ahead because it's only one verse, but it's in Jeremiah 47. I think we actually are going to turn there as well. That is one of the scriptures I didn't double check this week to remind myself on. We'll probably end up turning to Jeremiah chapter 47 anyways. But Zephaniah chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. Gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired. Before the decree bring forth, before the day passes the chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord comes upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger comes upon you. Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness, and it may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. Now, especially for Darren and Tony, that is the scripture that I was looking for last week as we were talking. That right there, Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 3. As we were talking about the return of the Lord. Verse 4, just a second. Verse 4, for Gaza shall be forsaken, and Ashkelon a desolation, and they shall drive out Ashdod at noonday, and Ekron shall be rooted up. Woe unto the inhabitants of the sea coast, the nation, the Cherethites. The word of the Lord is against you. O Canaan, the land of the Philistines, I will destroy even thee, and there shall be no inhabitant. And the sea coast shall be dwellings and cottages for shepherds, for folds, for flocks. And the coast shall be for remnant of the house of Judah, and they shall feed thereupon in the houses of Ashkelon, shall they lay down in the evening, for the Lord their God shall visit them, and turn away their captivity. We'll just pause there. This language for us Americans might not make a lot of sense. When you find sea coast Oftentimes these cities, these habitations were for trade, right? This entire area, the reason why Jerusalem is so important to so many nations is because it is a trade hub for the greater area, if you can see here. It stands as a major point of trade where you have the sea here where you can get up into Greece, you can get out over into Italy, to all those different nations over there. It stands as a way up out of Egypt. The Red Sea here goes down into, I believe, the top of Africa. There was a lot of trade, a lot of vessels that would come up through the Red Sea from Africa. In fact, there is a little town right here that was built on that never was owned by Israel, never was owned by Judah. I think their borders extend down there today. But there's a city that's built on remnants of a city. So there's just a little town, and right beside it there's the ruins of another town. It's been a very important trade city for millennia right there, because it's a port where a lot of goods come up from the Red Sea. Egypt coming up through Jerusalem. You have everything from up here. If they want to go down into that area, they have to go through Jerusalem, through that sphere of influence. This all right here being desert, a lot harder to cross if you try and cut through that area right there. So Jerusalem is very, very important for numerous nations because it does control all of the trade. If you remember a few weeks back, as we were talking about Joseph, as we were talking about Joseph, his brothers, as they sold him to those Ishmaelite traders, they were following the trade route that came from this area up here, Syria and such, came down and around, and it cut through Shem. And then it would go down through this area and kind of follow along the coast and go down into Egypt. A lot of very important trade routes going through there. One of those major points of trade, major things that we'll see also with Tyre up here in the north. I don't know if we'll actually make it there tonight, but it is in the notes for this evening, is that when you have places that are attached to the sea, when you have nations that are attached to the sea, you don't use those lands really for places to bed cattle. You use those lands as places to house people, things pertinent to that trade, right? Philistia, Phoenicia, they were both very powerful, very wealthy because of their trading influence, because of connections that they had going out into the sea, being able to be those ports of trade for all this landmass over here where people would bring their goods in and then they would ship them out, and there would be that trade. So as Zephaniah here is talking about these coastal cities being destroyed and becoming cottages, becoming places for herdsmen, for shepherds, he was essentially saying that he was going to take away their wealth. He was going to take away their ability to trade. These would no longer be very wealthy areas. These would no longer be places where people would walk through all the time with their caravans, where people would bring their goods. Right? These would become places where flocks would just graze, and they would pass through as they followed the fields, as they followed the rains and such, as the fertility of the grass would kind of move, and the herdsman would follow how the grass was growing. We'll go ahead and continue reading here in Zephaniah, since we're already here, because he does continue to proclaim judgment against some other nations, some other peoples that we'll find are judged later on in Amos. Verse 8, I have heard the reproach of Moab and the revelings of the children of Ammon, whereby they have reproached my people and magnified themselves against their border. Therefore, as I live, saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, surely Moab will be as Sodom, and the children of Ammon as Gomorrah, even the breeding of nettles and salt pits, and a perpetual desolation. The residue of my people shall spoil them, and the remnant of my people shall possess them. This shall they have for their pride, because they have reproached and magnified themselves against the people of the Lord of hosts. And the Lord will be terrible unto them, for he will famish all the gods of the earth, and men will worship him, every one from his place, even all the isles of the heathen. Ye Ethiopians also. And this is a people that we don't see come up often, but the Ethiopians would come up every once in a while in battle array against the people up here, because they were attached to them by the Red Sea. So every once in a while there would be campaigns by the Ethiopians up into Egypt, not as much into this area here of Israel and Judea, but they would also do a lot of trading with these people here. If you remember in Acts chapter 7, I believe, the man that Philip was sent to talk to was a eunuch of Ethiopia. I believe it was the woman that Solomon had interacted with, the Queen of Sheba. She was a queen of Ethiopia down in this area. Sheba was a portion or piece of the Ethiopian kingdom during that time, if I remember correctly. You might fact check me on some of these things to find out that I'm off just a little bit, but we're close. We're close enough. All right, verse 13. And he will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria, and will make Nineveh a desolation and dry like a wilderness. And flocks shall lie down in the midst of her, and all the beasts of the nations, both the cormorant and the bittern, shall lodge in the upper lintels of it. I believe those are birds. Their voice shall sing in the windows. Desolations shall be in the thresholds. For he shall uncover the cedar work. This is the rejoicing city that dwelt carelessly, that said in her heart, I am, and there is none beside me. How is she become a desolation, a place for beasts to lie down in? Everyone that passeth by her shall hiss and wag his hand. In other words, people will walk by these places that were once so great, so wealthy, so majestic in their architecture and their power, and they'll just shake their heads. Our equivalent would be like ticking their tongue, you know. Man, what a shame. But that's what Zephaniah has to say about these various nations. And we find that God is pronouncing judgment not only against the nations immediately surrounding Jerusalem and Israel, but also sending prophets to pronounce his judgment against these greater nations that are outside of the immediate borders of that area, right? Because they all have had interactions with God's people. These are all nations that have had interactions with Judah, with Israel, with the Lord, right? These are all nations who should have at some point in their history looked upon what the Lord was doing for these little people, even in just preserving them. While Assyria was able to take away many nations, while they were able to conquer many peoples in their military might, they came against the walls of Jerusalem and they were repelled. Right? What is that one little city there? What does that have that none of those other nations, that none of those other people had? Well, they had the Lord. When Jonah was sent to Nineveh, and Assyria for a moment turned their hearts in repentance to the Lord stayed their destruction. He stayed the desolation that would eventually come upon them. He sent another prophet to them, said, hey, you guys are getting unruly again, behave yourselves. They turned their hearts against him, and the Lord allowed that little Chaldean rebellion to overtake them with the help of the neighbors up here with the Midianites as they came in and would eventually conquer Assyria. As we find ourselves looking at the world today, looking at the world around us, we find a world that has had plenty of encounters with the Lord that they should know better. Right? It doesn't matter what language they speak, where they're at in the world. By now, the gospel has been proclaimed to every people. It's been proclaimed to all nations. Everyone has had a chance to repent. And as their destruction draws ever closer, as the second coming of Christ it draws ever closer to us. Just as we find in these prophetic writings here in the Old Testament, in these minor prophets. Apologies, I forgot to turn that off. Just as we find God declares to these people, for 3 sins and even 4 I will destroy you. We find that God will be completely justified in the eradication of these people. He will be completely justified in judgment by fire, as we know is coming. As the last days come upon us, we find this very same language being used. God will judge by fire. He will destroy with fire. There will be death. There will be hardship. There will be conquering armies as the Lord executes his judgment. We look sort of at the last days as being something that is brought about by the Antichrist coming on the scene. Right? That's how we're conditioned to look at it. But we must make no mistake. Even as the Antichrist is allowed to rise to power, even as the Antichrist is allowed to do great and terrible things on this earth, he is still the rod of the Lord's judgment. He is still allowed to do these things by the Lord. He cannot do anything that the Lord has not allowed him to do. We find that our adversary cannot do anything that the Lord has not allowed him, expressly allowed him to do. And so it is today.